An official hi to everyone. Happy Friday. So let's talk protecting your family's future. Tiffany Chin and Rachel Biggio here, your LA Realtors with the Tiffany Chin Group. Here's Rachel. So as we know, over the past 21 months, small business owners of all kinds have been forced to get creative. So we at the Tiffany Chin Group are continuing our journey to do our part in helping to give back to the community that has been so good to us over the years. So this is our small business spotlight that we are relaunching. So we're featuring local small businesses with noteworthy services and products. Today we're shining a spotlight on Geslin Law with Bahar Geslin. We're talking to Bahar today about the estate planning legal guidance that she provides families. So welcome to our show, Bahar, and thank you so much for taking time for us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Rachel, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, we're so excited to have you here. All right, well, let's dive into it. Let's start from the beginning. Would you mind sharing with us the origin story of Geslin Law and why you entered this field?
Sure. Yeah. After I had my son, I have three beautiful children, and my eldest is going to be 11 soon. I actually, many of you will be shocked by this, was let go from my firm the day I got back from maternity leave. Lawyers seem to be the worst offenders of that. And it really forced me to think about, what do I want to do? I was doing a lot of different things, including litigation, and I really wanted to do something that was service oriented. I wanted to use my legal skills to do something where people were giving me hugs at the end of the process and not just, upset because they got a big bill, even if they, got a good outcome. And that really felt like estate planning. It's like, we all work really hard to create a legacy, whatever that is, and to protect that for families. And so I thought long and hard about what I wanted to do, and that's what I landed on. So that's how I started my estate planning practice and Geslin Law almost a decade ago.
Wow, that's so
Wow.
exciting.
So, can you explain what exactly is estate planning?
That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the word estate, it can be so scary. Like everyone has an estate. All three of us have an estate, and they could be of differing values. People think of the word estate like, oh, someone who has a lot of money, like a home with gates and a long tree-lined driveway or something like that. I mean, I'm sure the two of you can help people find estates like that in LA, but yeah, those are ideal, right? But really, it can be our condo, it can be our 401k, it can be our savings, whatever that is. So estate planning is protecting that asset, whatever it is, for the future, and so that you can use that asset if something happens to you in an untimely manner, like you're incapacitated or something. And an estate plan, a comprehensive estate plan. Also, I just want to say hi to all the viewers out there. I know a lot of people are watching and saying hi. And there may be some of you watching from other parts of the world or other states. I am a California licensed attorney, so please check with your local counsel, your local attorneys, to find out what the laws are in your particular location. But everything I say here is general advice for those of us that are in California, which is where the three of us are. So in California, if you have a piece of real property or $166,250 or more in gross assets, so not taking into account any debt or liability, and you pass away and you don't have a trust, then your estate goes through probate. We have all these different court systems, right? And so an estate plan helps protect those assets from going through probate and making sure that your legacy goes directly to the people that you want it to, whether that's your kids or other family members, your friends, or maybe even charities. Again, an estate plan, a comprehensive estate plan includes a revocable living trust, probably a will, and incapacity documents like a durable power of attorney, advanced health care directive in California, HIPAA release, and some other ancillary documents.
Great. Well, thanks for enlightening us on that front. So what exactly do people stand to lose if they don't plan their estate in advance?
That's a great question. So the short answer is time and money. Okay. And maybe fighting would be number three. And let me flesh that out for you a little bit. So I talked about this trust, right? Again, another term that people think, well, that doesn't apply to me. They think that a trust is for somebody with a lot of money and that's very wealthy. Many of us don't consider ourselves wealthy. But really the trust in California, like I said, if you own real property or have more than $166,250 in gross assets, and you don't have a trust, your estate will go through probate. Doesn't matter if you have a will, and it doesn't matter if you have something neatly written on a napkin, you have to have a trust. And the reason why we want to have a trust and avoid probate is because probate is a very long process and a very costly process. And it also, it's a public process, right? So if you want to keep your affairs private, what assets you have and who's getting what, the best way to do that is through an estate plan and a trust document. So not everyone's out there knowing your business.
Right. Yeah, so I know that you touched on this before and you've told me before that, your privacy can be protected too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want your Uncle John that you've never met or, met once at Thanksgiving knocking on, somebody's door and claiming something because now everybody knows what you had and how much of it and who it's going to. The trust document really keeps everything between you, your successor trustee, that's who you nominate to handle your affairs after you pass, and your beneficiaries, and just very private.
You really want to maximize what your beneficiaries will walk away with, right?
Absolutely, that's the money portion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when probate gets involved, they assess statutory fees based on the gross value of your estate. So let's say like one of your clients, they have a home, and if you're in this part of LA, like it's probably worth $1 million, right? And you have a mortgage on it. But the probate assesses fees on the gross value. They don't take into account your mortgage. So you're probably looking at $35,000, $40,000 in fees just right off the top that are going to your personal representative and attorney, as opposed to creating a trust. So that money goes, directly to your beneficiaries. And then the time, probate on a good day takes at least a year, and probably more likely 2 years or more to settle because our court systems are so bogged down and everything has to move through the court when you don't create a trust document.
Right. And we've all worked so hard for what we have that it's for the legacy of whoever is going to be benefiting from these. So you really want to protect that and their sanity. They're going through a loss too, right?
Absolutely. Definitely. When you're grieving, the last thing you want to be doing is looking for documents and dealing with lawyers and, going to hearings. That's the other added benefit to creating, this estate plan, is that it forces you to organize everything, do some general housekeeping. That account you opened in college that has $300 in it, let's close it out. We don't need to worry about it, and have a roadmap for your beneficiaries and successor trustee. So like you said, Tiffany, when you're grieving, you've just lost a loved one, you're not having to deal with all of that. Everything's organized and in its proper place.
I love that. Rachel?
So I know you kind of touched on this a little bit as we've been talking, but I think it's important that we should reiterate this. So who should be thinking about estate planning right now?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so everybody should be thinking of it, but certainly if you have minor children, if you own any kind of real property, so home, condo, land, and then even if you don't meet that, I'm just going to say $150,000 for ease. Even if you don't have $150,000 in gross assets, but we're all working and maybe it'll get to that in the near future, you're not going to be sitting at your account and say, oh, I hit $166,250. Let me go make a trust. You want to have it in place. And maybe, I know that Tiffany, you and Rachel work with first-time home buyers all the time. You don't have to wait till you buy the home. you can create the trust now, and then when you buy the home, you don't have to redo it. It's just that you'll take title. Instead of taking title in Tiffany and Rachel's name, it'll be in the Tiffany and Rachel family trust name, or whatever you choose to call it, and everything's there. So, that's just how it works. You create it now, and then you add and subtract from it as you need it, and you don't really have to go back and keep amending it. So to that end, Rachel, you asked me who should be looking at it. So as you're starting out, you should look at it, and then people need to look at it again when they've, now their kids are grown, and the plan that they created, I call it the oh shit plan, when their kids are younger. It's like, what happens to them if we go out on a date night and don't come back? That's always, the biggest fear for people. And now you have a different plan. Now you have grandkids. Now your kids are married. We like their spouses. We don't like their spouses. We want everything to go to the grandkids, and we want to cut the kids out completely. Or maybe we're saying to heck with everyone and everything's going to charity. There's so many different things. Or your successor trustee that you named has now moved to Singapore for work, or, has 5 kids, and no way could they now take on being your successor trustee. So that's the other time, Rachel, when people have, life has shifted. Even if they have a plan, they want to make sure to look at it again, and adjust it as their life adjusts.
Right.
Makes sense.
And what's the first step someone should take in order to get started on planning their estate? Because that first step is always the most difficult one. So what should we do?
It's so true. Find someone that you trust. I would say, in California, you need to have a licensed attorney doing this. There are a lot of organizations or paralegals that engage in the unauthorized practice of law. You definitely want an attorney. So I would say find an attorney, and ask your friends who they use. Did they have a good experience with them? This can be really heavy. It can be really scary, right? We're talking about planning for your death. And we all know it's going to happen one day, and we hope it's a very long time from now, but it can be really emotional. So find out what their process is, and someone that can move you through that you get along with ease. And I think the first step is finding the right attorney, and then they'll do the rest. They should do all the heavy lifting for you.
We'll leave that to the heavy lifting.
Right. We don't need to lift anything else heavy.
Nothing.
For those who already have an estate plan in place, what else should we be thinking about?
Right. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I can elaborate. So you already have a plan, and some key player that you named within the documents, their life changed. I just have a client whose, brother was named throughout the documents, and now he has, a health condition that wouldn't allow him. And so she needed to shift the order of everything, or, somebody got divorced, somebody moved away. And then a lot of times, we might name somebody of an older generation, right? When we're younger, our trusted advisors might be our parents or an aunt and uncle, somebody. And then as they get older, we may come into that role for them, and we now need to shift someone else into those roles. So I think that would be a good time to look at your documents again, and just make sure everything's up to date. The other big thing, and I know you both probably get this question a lot from clients being agents, is how do I take title, to my home? Mm-hmm. So, you might advise them or point them in the right direction during that time. When you create a trust, your attorney should transfer your home to the name of your trust, right? But then over the years, you may refinance, or you sold that home that you owned when you created the trust, and now you own a new home. Well, make sure that everything's properly titled in the name of your trust, and that schedule of assets, and this will all make sense when you sit down with somebody, that everything's properly listed. You have all your accounts on there, and they're all properly titled in the name of the trust. Mm-hmm. So those are good steps for people that already have a plan in place, to make sure that they that everything's up to date. And you can always, my clients call me and we check in, and there may be nothing we need to do, or maybe we need to rehaul something.
Right, right. And I know we've talked about this in passing before, but who of your loved ones need to plan their estate? My parents needed to, and I had to nudge them. So other people may also need to get that ironed out. They may not want to talk about it, as you know, but they do
Absolutely.
get that ready. So
Yeah. Sometimes people feel like it's a bad omen to think about, to contemplate a death, or it's going to bring something bad, or it can be cultural. It's very difficult.
yeah,
But I think educating them on, if you're going to be the one left standing and dealing with probate and going through all of those things, that can be a really big motivating factor. Like, gee, I don't want you and your brother, or like you and your sisters, fighting over this or confused about what to do. And again, that statutory fee that it costs when you're going through probate is a huge motivating factor. What? This, someone else is going to get 35,000? Heck no, I worked hard for that. I want it to go to you all.
right, right. Oh, good point. And I know definitely from a cultural standpoint, like, Asian people just do not want to talk about preparing for their death or anything. So it's good to bring up. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to add?
We've got there's a question that's come from comments. So Bahar, are you saying that any asset you buy, like a boat, should be added to your trust?
So yeah, thank you, Jamie, for that question. I know her and her beau just bought a boat. So I don't. They're in Florida. I don't know in Florida, but in California, we don't need to put boats in cars. What we do in a proper estate plan, there's something called an assignment of personal property. We assign any of those interests to the trust, so we don't have to. That way, when you upgrade to your yacht that you're going to take your friend Bahar on next time she visits, you don't have to keep changing it. Boats and cars are easy enough to change, so we don't usually put those in the name of the trust, but we may list them on the schedule of assets. So it is important to talk to your attorney about, but depending on where you live, you may or may not have to actually change title to the document. I see, Jamie, you asked another question. If you're left money or assets from someone else's trust, can it just go automatically into your trust? Oh my gosh, I love this question because I can talk about community property and separate property. So California is a community property state, and that means that anything that you acquire during your marriage, whether that's your income or real property, is community property. That's the presumption in California. But separate property is anything you come into the marriage with, or that you inherit or are gifted during the marriage. So to your question, if it's something that you inherit from somebody else's trust, you could leave it in that trust, and you may be required to do so per the terms of the trust. But usually, if you're an adult and getting it, my advice, because a trust has to file a tax return once it becomes irrevocable. So, if Tiffany and I are married and we create a joint family trust, it's revocable. It means we can cancel, change it, amend it at any time. Mm-hmm. Once the second of us passes, it becomes irrevocable. It gets a federal tax ID number, and it has to file a tax return every year that it's around. So your family member's existing trust, you may not want to have to go through that expense and hassle. So instead, you want to take title to the asset. And then if it's your separate property, if you're married, you want to put it in your separate property trust. And that way it doesn't get commingled into community property. You could decide to bring it into your community property and put it into your family trust, but that's definitely something you want to talk about with your attorney. Nobody cares about, I always say, nobody cares about community property and separate property until you're getting divorced, and no one wants to think about getting divorced, but the divorce rate is more than 50%. So talk to your attorney about it.
Right. Well, I'm curious, and that brings up a good point, because we have plenty of, single men and women who buy property on their own, and they ask us, how can we protect this as, our own property, even if we do get married in the future? What are those parameters?
Right. So again, I'm a lawyer, so I have to like say this ad nauseum. Talk to a lawyer, talk to a lawyer, talk to a
Yep.
lawyer. But general advice is make sure when you acquire that property, you create your own trust, right? So if you're single, it's like, if I'm single, it's the Bahar Geslin separate property trust. And then and I hold title to that home in it. As long as I'm single, my income is my separate property.
Right.
But the day I get married, my income now becomes community property. So you might want to have a prenuptial agreement, or less attractive is a postnuptial agreement. I much prefer a prenuptial agreement, which means you make an agreement before you get married. And then you don't want to commingle the asset. So you want to make sure that when you, let's say it's not a home that you're living in, because that's usually what happens, right? It's like somebody buys a home, they get married, now the new spouse is living in the home, and you have community property assets, your income gets converted to community property, and it was separate property. Yeah, your down payment was separate property, the kitchen remodel was, but now all of a sudden you're paying for it with community property funds.
Right.
And people always say to me, but I hold title in my name alone. And I go, well, that doesn't matter. Tell the judge that. It's a community, it converts to community property. So you want to make sure that you really are clear about what's community and what's separate. Let's say in a different scenario where you're not living in the home, you buy a condo, you live there, you get married, you move out, but you're renting it out. You want to make sure that you're keeping that asset clearly separate. You're not taking community property funds to, update the bathroom and stuff. Now you may not have the ability to do that. You're like, great, I didn't get a money tree with the house, right? Like I have to use community funds. But again, it's a conversation you want to have. Nobody cares about it until they're getting divorced and they're like, no, that condo was my separate property. And their attorney's like, actually, part of it is converted because you use community property funds to do stuff to it or to pay the mortgage. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I love that advice. Rachel knows. We tell our clients all the time. All right. Well, Bahar, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Friday to tell us about your business. We're really rooting for you and truly hope that your business will continue to thrive.
Thank you. This was so much fun. Thank you both for inviting me.
You're so welcome.
And, for all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining us live today, and, for your attention and all of your awesome questions. Just remember, we are all in this pandemic together. It is not over. And it's more important than ever that we really spread love into the world. So please support, our local businesses. If you're not local here, support your local businesses, and enjoy your weekend and stay safe out there.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye,
Enjoy
everyone.
your weekend. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Rachel. Bye, Bahar. Thanks.
Bye, Tiffany. Bye, Rachel.
Bye.